Hello again, what lurks beneath. This is the Facebook werewolf guy here, with another true experience, as promised. Last story was mostly supernatural, about Ouija boards, but I know your channel is cryptid focused, so I decided to wait on another account that I've had, and give a short but quick real experience with the cryptid sighting that I had this past summer of 2019. I watch a channel that is fairly focused regularly, and she had done a video at the time that mentioned fairy cats, which conjured up some fair memories. I commented, and this is this. Well, this time wasn't as weird as the last two times, where I had not thought about your channel, until right up to the day where you uploaded new material. But, I must admit this time, I thought about your channel a few times over the last week, and I thought this would help. I live out near the woods in Central Florida, and I decided to take care of some stray cats who were hanging out near my home. A male and a female. They eventually had kittens. All seemed well. I tried to keep the female in the house, but my poodle kept trying to mate with her, and it obviously didn't work out. Then, strangely, one by one, over a couple of weeks, they began to disappear. I didn't understand what was going on. I never heard any commotion or anything outside at night. I eventually spoke to a neighbor who also strangely has two poodles, and she said she stopped letting them out at night because one night she saw a dark shadow, the size of a mid-sized dog, chasing after them, but it stopped at the edge of the woods. Then, another neighbor said that she saw a shadow near the woods, trying to take her cat one evening and stop letting her out entirely. I tried 3 shelters to save the remaining cats, but none would take them. I took them back home, and still, every morning, I'd find another missing, and because they were wild caging didn't work. They destroyed the cage, knocked the litter all over the place, and would cry all night when I did that. So I let them out. In a few days, they were all gone. I'm heartbroken over it, but what could I do? I couldn't take them for a ride. No one might have picked them up, and they still could have died. It's just so strange I never heard a sound. Not a fight or a scream, or squealing or anything. Just disappearing one by one. Seeing your video about fairy cats brought back memories. Good ones, of course. Raisin, the mom, looked like the Meow Mix cat. Her mate, I called Tabby, was a tabby cat. The little black one, I called Coley. The 2 gray twins, I called the 2 Diddies. The little Ray got her name because she looked like the mom, and Tabs Jr. looked like the dad. I love them, and they're just gone. Drives me nuts not knowing exactly what happened. No sound, no noise, nothing. Creepy, and sad to say the least. Okay, so that was my first comment on her video. Not too long after, so many weeks later or so, I commented again, letting her know that I saw the culprit that did it. Well, finally discovered what killed my cats, and no telling what else. I'm drunk and upset, but it's the truth. I saw a canine-type Chupacabra run across the front lawn at dusk. Leather gray skin and a puff of white hair on the tip of its tail. It was not normal. Though the size of a shepherd, it was thin, gangly, and strange. A kind of long torso and hunched back. I saw it out my window for 2 seconds. An hour later, I went on at night with a flashlight to investigate. I found a fat rabbit in the very small man-made pond in the front yard. I used a rake to help it escape drowning, since it could not get out. It probably jumped in to escape that monster. I'm positive that's what took my cats. I love those cats and kittens. Nature sucks and blows. Where are the protective fairy spirits of the forest to defend the innocent lives of animals? My question is cynical, as well as rhetorical. So that's my story. Quick and to the point. nasty, upsetting story, but true. Again, appreciate you reading my stories to you and your audience. Be careful, stay safe, and to quote another favorite channel of mine, this world is a strange one. I spent the vast majority of my teenage life living with my grandfather and aunt. They owned a few dogs, a couple cats, and 2 horses. I distinctly remember my grandfather one night shooting at something that he believed was a chupacabra. Funny thing is, this was in the late 90s. I had never even heard of a chupacabra before. Not until the early 2000s, when it kind of became popularized on TV. Shows like Sci-Fi and Discovery Channel, where they would have those scripted shows that talk about Bigfoot. Then, they began talking about a small dog-like creature, or at least what they thought was, that was draining the blood out of animals. While some thought this to be the work of alien abduction, my grandfather got a good look at the creature that was responsible. Going out one morning to take care of his 2 prized horses, one was found dead in its stall, 2 large puncture holes found in its neck. What was alarming was that the puncture holes in its neck were 3/4 of an inch in diameter. That's huge, and they were 1.5 inches apart. No blood, nothing. It was as if the blood had just completely drained out of the horse. The horse also appeared to have been dead for several days, even though my grandfather had just tended his horses the night prior. I can remember that being a very hard loss for my grandfather. Since Grandma died, he became really attached to those 2 horses, spent a lot of time with them, riding them. He was definitely an animal lover, and losing that one horse, that was really rough. That same night, this thing came back on, which would I believe to claim the life of the other horse. He had his rifle ready, and when it came on near the stall, he got a good look at it, and coming from someone like my grandfather, he was pretty scared. He said that the bullets appeared to go right through it, and that it appeared as if this creature had crawled right out of the pits of hell, or at least appeared to be that way, aesthetically. In fact, he kept making references of like a large cat, or even a saber-toothed cat, mentioning how it had large protruding canines coming from the front of its mouth that were oversized for its entire body, and was ultimately terrified by the sheer speed and force that this creature seemed to possess. He called it otherworldly, and said he has never in his entire 86 years of life seen anything remotely close to what he saw. It wasn't a wolf, and it wasn't no dog. This thing was larger, and was almost a smoky black color. He also talked about the horrendous smell of sulfur and rotting meat. I don't know if that has anything to do with the actual sightings of Chupacabra, but it was a very interesting note. I'm now 42, and my grandfather has long since passed away, but this encounter has always stuck out to me, because even though I didn't physically see it, my grandfather was very much shaken up, and our little farm, our little home, was attacked by one of these things. So, in a way, I like to say that we actually had a real-life encounter with these things. I'm not writing this into you with the claim to know anything about cryptids or anything that goes on in the world, but I can share my disturbing experiences, at least one. I had some pretty close friends who lived in the Navajo reservation. Believe me, I know they have their own sets of standards and rituals and lots of crazy weird things that happen on their own reservation. A lot of things I don't quite know about or understand. But I tried to ignore all that the best I could. And I spent time there often because my friends were, well, very hospitable and would always want me over, enjoying time with their family and other relatives. Because of this, we would spend time outside often, not during the nighttime, of course, but during the day, exploring, going on hikes when we could. And I'll never forget one day where my friend and his family took me out to this really cool place that I'm not going to name because I feel like naming it would be leading people to go there, assuming you are going to read this. But this place is kind of higher up, and it's actually in Arizona, a little ways away from the reservation. We drove out because my friend and his family have family that live out there. Anyway, on this trail, about 3 p.m., we found at least 4 or 5 dead coyotes, all of them having their blood completely drained of their body. And even the way they had died, they had this terrible expression on their face, as if they died in terror, and they had huge gash marks on their neck. Not like a knife, but like something bit or torn to their neck. No other part of their body was ripped open, cut open, sliced. No damage, nothing. It's as if something had just tore their neck and left. The other strange thing was there was no blood anywhere around them, nor was the wound on their necks bloody at all. Their body also didn't appear to be decaying, which is very weird. As you know, any cadaver left under extreme heat conditions rots and decays pretty quickly, especially when there's humid conditions. But these had clearly been there for what appeared to be days, but also appeared to be fresh. Let me explain a little better. Fresh, as in there was no flies, like it was a fresh cadaver, but the corpses clearly looked a little bit old, like they were kind of mummified in a way. It was very strange, and I think it was because a lack of any apparent body fluids. I had never seen anything quite like it. The marks on their neck, all at the same spot, the same size, kind of looked like a mix between a gash and a tear. It's hard to really explain how it looked, but it was very strange, and it all creeped us out. In fact, after about a mile or so, we ended up turning back, because these corpses were littered almost all over the trail. This isn't a public nature preserve trail, just more of a little private area that their family frequents. This has always bothered me for a long time, mainly because I never know who to talk to get answers. But after watching a lot of your videos, I feel like you might have a pretty well-educated opinion and guess on what it is that I saw. When I was 12, me and a few friends ventured through a local graveyard, a rather large one, actually. I don't know, maybe 10 plus acres? It's a pretty large graveyard. Anyway, being 12 years old, we thought it was fun and very creepy. But the actual story takes place when we saw something towards the center of the cemetery. Like most cemeteries, it wasn't filled with spooky owls or dead trees or mist. It was your pretty stereotypical North American cemetery. Lots of graves, a black iron fence surrounding, and lots of very much alive trees. But on this night, around maybe 1 in the morning, it's obviously pitch black, tucked away from the road, and all we had was flashlights. All 3 of us, including me, saw this creature, which scurried away, very strangely. When we saw movement up ahead, we all shone our lights, and by the way, at this point, we're walking towards the center of the cemetery, where there is an incredibly large oak tree. We shine our lights because we think we saw movement, and sure enough, this large figure comes heading out to the right and leaps and jumps, but it was walking on all 4. We only saw it for a couple of seconds, and to give you the best description, it was a pale white-gray color, on all 4s, kind of like a hairless dog, but I can vividly and distinctly remember these long spikes or spines coming out of its back and back legs. The head was much more humanoid. It kind of looked a little bit dog-like, but very alien-like. Large black eyes, and it had these massive fangs coming out of its mouth. I'm not talking about just vampire fangs. I mean large fangs for every teeth, like there were too many teeth for its mouth. It didn't really look in our direction, but its mouth was open, and this thing was a pretty good-sized animal. It kind of hesitated for a second, jumped out of the oak tree, and then off it went into the night. It moved so fast that our flashlights could not keep up. It scared all of us, and so we left and ran away. We've always talked about it since, and I'm still really good friends with those 3 kids that I did that with. We bring it up casually, always wondering, what is it that we saw that night? While one of us speculates it was the rake, or a crawler, I'm not so sure that it fits the descriptions. Sounds like it could be something alien, or more than that. What's your opinion?